My favorite thing about quilting is taking stuff apart and putting it right back together. Well, I also enjoy playing with color, and today's simple slice and swap block is just that. Let's get started. That's right, ever since I designed my original slice-a-block quilt, my brain has been playing with like a double slice approach, but I also wanted to mix colors around and stuff, so we're kind of calling this a slice and swap because we're going to take 4 different fabrics and make a block that looks just like this. So before we get too far along, I'm going to ask you to bounce down into that description below and print out your free printable. This will help you stay organized while you're working through all your fabrics, right? So for supplies, get yourself a 10 by 10 pack. I love using batiks and solids together, so I used Island Batik fabrics for this, and then I used a Moda 1.5 inch skinny strip setup so that I didn't have to pre-cut all of my own 1.5 inch strips. White, cream against the blue, something like that's gonna be awesome for your color choices, right? Before I race into the construction, join me here at the quilt. I wanna show you what you're getting yourselves into today, right? Now, if you look real closely, you'll see all 40 squares were used in the layout. I've got 5 by 8, and here's an individual block we've created. So you've got kind of those diagonal slice strips, but we also have regular squared up sashing, and I'll be showing you how to get to those towards the end of the video today and how to put those all in a real fast and efficient method. Now, I also want to point out real quick, as I was working on the blocks, I was never real concerned with all of this center part lining up because I knew how square this was going to be. I wanted it to look like a fractured glass or a fracture, you know, like a mosaic of sorts. So I'm going to kind of show you a little bit more of a free piecing technique today as well. You can work on your own personal level of accuracy. It's all about getting it done and having fun, right? So in order to do that, take your 10-inch square batik pre-cut pack and just start undoing it. And now what I did in this one is I had multiples of each fabric. So I just built piles around on my table. Some of these I've already used because I have some parts I've already built up for us. And I did kind of just unpack it in the order in which the manufacturer sent it to me, right? But then after that, what I started doing is I just randomly grabbed a square, and I'll just dive in here and grab a couple of different colors. Like I love this green sand dollar print, and let's get really a light and bright one. So I choose 4 individual squares. So I do that for all of my piles first before I start cutting into anything. But today I'm just going to do it through 4 pieces so that you can follow along. I have a lot I want to show you. Now, with that, in order to keep these accurate, we are going to want to take a moment and hit them with our iron because we're going to stack them up really nice and square to each other before we cut them. So let's just press this down, move these over here like this. And as you come in, we're just going to line up these squares real nice. And I choose to press them one at a time instead of trying to get them all at the same time. Just because I feel like it helps keep it crisp enough. And another thing I'd like to point out, actually, especially with Island Batik, they figured out a really cool way to screen print on some of their batiks. So not all batiks are universal anymore. So take this print, for example. When I look in here, I want to make sure that I see the level of saturation that looks good to my eye. So something like this, I might see some spotting in one spot. If I flip it over, it looks a little bit brighter, more intense to me. So I'm going to choose this as my right sides, and my right sides in all of this project are just always up. Now, some of these, and this was not one of them, will actually be screen printed, and you really see a big color difference. And so if you see that, make sure you have the value up that you want. And of course, it's a batik, so you really can use either side. Okay, so back to work here. We've got them all nicely stacked and ready to be sliced. Mathematically, geometrically speaking, and I don't want to get too confusing here, but I don't want you to cut a straight line. And I really don't want you to cut a really big diagonal line either, because if we cut a gradual, kind of across the middle line, like yay, we can actually get all 4 of these squares made with just 2 of those skinny strips we're using because of the math. So anyways, we're going to make a gradual angled line here. And then I'm going to go ahead and do another angle top to bottom. And it does not matter if I switch my angles, and I do encourage you throughout all of the blocks you're creating to make slightly different angles to add interest and character within your blocks. So I'm going to slice this now here, and let's just separate these so you can see, right, the pieces. Now, funny enough, I found out this the hard way. If you start manipulating these just right, you'll notice they look very, very similar in shape and size. So that's why we've created this printable. I want you to keep this handy so that you can always know we're sewing our seams together and you can see these angles as we go. And also it will help you for sorting out your fabrics. So we're going to just call this pile 1 for now, and you see fabric 1 in all those positions. So our next move is I'm going to take fabric 1 from the top, and I'm going to sneak it underneath everything else. So now I have 2 different fabrics here. Coming over here to fabric 3 pile, or pile number 3, I'm actually going to peel off fabric 1 and fabric 2 together, and then I'm moving them in order below. So now fabric 3 is showing, and then the easiest way is go ahead and grab fabric 4 from the bottom, and then just bring it to the top here. And what you've done is you've created 4 blocks with all 4 different fabrics all throughout, each being unique, right? Super easy. Now you get to start sewing. I do not cut all of my blocks. I only cut 4 at a time, but I do sort all of my blocks before I get started. I hope that makes sense for all of us. Okay, now using those narrow strips, I'm going to first sew together the seams, and I always do this between fabrics 1 and 2 here. So I'm coming over, remember we were right sides up, and I've left the selvage on the little strip, so I'm just starting just past the selvage, and I've got a nice 1/4 inch edge guide on. And we're going to sew through here just like this. And when I talk about free piecing, what I'm really referring to is the method of cutting without a ruler often, and or sew, press, trim, sew, press, trim kind of idea. So as I come over to my ironing station, I learned that I always want to press away from the white. So I have my batik fabric up, my white fabric down, just like yay. And I'm going to move these up slightly so we can work right here. And then I do use my ruler to keep my hand safe and to keep my lines accurate, and I do trim each one as I go. So I'm trimming, following the line of the batik, and I'm just trimming off the white piece there. And I really want to maximize as much of this white strip as possible. Literally all of my squares, I was able to get 1 square out of half, so 1 strip for 2 squares by trimming there, okay? Now what's going to happen is we're going to add on the fabric number 2. And I want you to look at something really close. And this would make sense because I've done enough of these, but at first I kind of panicked, right? Oh no, it doesn't line up. Look, that looks short down here or something. Well, what happened was it was perfect when it was cut over here, but now we've added this distance in between here. So we're going to square all of our blocks at the end down to 10 1/4 to make life really easy for ourselves. I am going to add another strip in here, so to make sewing easiest, I want to get this line more accurate than the outer edge. But what I learned to do to make life the easiest was I kind of just split the difference between the pieces, and I come on over here like yay, and I'm going to come right into the machine. Now that way, when we come back to our ironing station, I'm going to press, again, holding the batik in the air, this way, so I don't have any of the seam allowance showing in my white strips here. And now, let me show you, this is the top edge, so it's off slightly. This is the bottom edge, so it's off slightly as well. We split the difference. Now all I need to do to prepare for the next piece that will come in is just find the short side, line up to it, and trim it down, okay? Sometimes they lined up perfectly, sometimes they did not, and as I said, I square down to 10 1/4 at the end, but you can even square down to 10 if you needed. At 10 1/4, we can still fit them all along the white strips, and that was just my goal, was maximize fabric. Now, we've got fabrics 1 and 2 together. Now we're gonna go ahead and bring fabrics 3 and 4 together the exact same way. So fabric 3 is in my hand. I'm still working from that same white strip I had earlier, but there's been an angle cut on it, right? So if I put this together like that, I can guarantee that I'm going to make it when I trim. So that's how I like to work. That way I can line up just the corners ever so nicely. Run over to the machine here. We'll do the same pressing technique all the way through the quilt. Just like this here. You can see that I had the distance I needed for the angle, but I'm not really wasting much of that white strip at all, am I? Just the perfect amount like that. I've been practicing learning to cut a little more left-handed. This is a good spot to do it. A little pressure with my right hand. It feels so awkward, but if I go slow, I can get it. There. Now we're gonna bring in that piece number 4. Same thing's gonna happen. It's not gonna line up perfectly. You can try to line up that edge if you wanna practice that way. Let's do that together. So we're gonna line up that corner. Let's see how that comes out. And when I'm building quilts like this, I like to experiment with the piecing so that I can offer all of you solutions. I do apologize because I'm much more into finished is better than perfect concept because I love the machine quilting when I'm doing that. And so I'm often making my quilt tops so I can machine quilt them. And again, I wanted that fractured glass look. Hey, not too shabby though, right? I talked and stalled long enough that you can see that came out really sharp, but now the end is off over here. When I split the difference, it's a little easier to trim to 10 1/4 actually is what I found out. So that's why I was teaching you that way the first time through. Batik in the air, pressing over. But this side doesn't need trimmed any longer, so I'm gonna grab the last of that strip. I'm gonna check my angle one more time up here in that top corner. I can see that that angle's not running with me, so I'm gonna flip that strip over. Like yay, and we're gonna start again. So here we are, just gonna stitch that last strip on. And I am managing the seam allowance between the white and the batik here and the white and the batik here. So I use my finger to fold that over as it approached the presser foot or the sewing foot there. And then here, and you probably see the giant smile on my face, and not only did it sew together nicely, but here's what I wanna show you. There's the fold in our white strip, which means I still have more than half left, and that's all I needed for the first block. So once again, I was able to use half the strip to create one entire block, and now we'll be able to use the leftovers. And so it's very efficient construction for this. Now, okay, I have to think this one through. I was holding the batik in the air before, so I'm gonna hold the batik in the air again as I press this. Flop that open like yay. We're going to trim this down. And I'm trimming the edge there. I'm trimming the edge over here. Like that. Save that for the next series of construction. And now I'm just going to bring this back together right here. Now, as I was trying to say at the quilt earlier, is I'm not overly concerned about the way this is going to line up in here because I want to make sure I can at least get a 10-inch square when I'm done. So I'm going to still split the difference over here on the edges, making sure that that helps me line up nicely. As I approach the machine, I'm looking, double checking. Watch those seams as they come through there. It just keeps everything nice and flat later on in the project. Okay, last to press. And we've got some trimming down to do. And I'm going to trim this one for you, but I really want you to make all all 40 of your squares first, because when you're doing that style of work, it's always best to measure your squares and make sure you're cutting all your squares to your smallest. Think about that one for a second. I think it'll make sense. Now, using a big square, the easiest thing for me to do is to kind of find my best lines. Like this line right here is looking pretty good. It's running pretty good. So I would like to go ahead and bring this down into the bottom. And then I am going to first, let's get my ruler correct. Here is 10, 10. 10 1/4 is down here. So what I really want to try to do is lay it out barely, and I'm just going to shave. Our first cut's just a shave cut. Shave, shave, and shave along that way there. And then I'm going to rotate it 180 degrees. So now I have that crisp corner I just created down here at my 10 1/4 mark and my 10 1/4 mark. Looking there. And then we just shave and we just shave. And the beautiful thing is if you had a little bit of fabric from one of those that didn't line up, you're still doing 1/4 inch seam allowances all the way around. But again, like I said, measure all of your blocks, make sure you're trimming to your smallest. 10 or 10 1/4 will work beautifully for this project. Now that we have all of our squares made, we need to start talking about how we're going to get our sashings in place. So let's talk about it, but let's look at the whole quilt together. Now, the only thing I did in putting all the all-over layout together on this quilt is I did not necessarily worry about always having like a one fabric position here. What I really tried to do was make sure that none of the same fabrics ever touched, right? So sometimes they might be close opposite corners. I don't know if I found that. I've been looking and looking. So I spent a good 30 or 40 minutes on my design wall playing and mixing and playing and mixing until all of my different squares had fabric that was in different positions. So if I had two fabrics that were the same fabric coming together like this, I would not have used that. I would have at least rotated the block. Whoops, now they touch up here. Rotate again here, and even that happened a couple times in the quilt, and that's just fine. But you need to do all of your layout, and as I said on the project before, I have 5 squares across and 8 up and down. We only need to sash in between the center squares. So what I did is I took another strip. I figured out where my sashing pieces were going to be, and then I basically am missing a square somewhere anyways. It's floating around here. Oh, I know what I did. I added it to my last block strip. So I'll put these together. Sorry, I'm quilt brained today. So what we're going to do is we're going to put a sashing between each of these. So I'm going to take my white strip. I'm going to take my block, and I'm going to set it up right sides together, dodging the selvage, meaning not using it. And this you can actually chain piece. And not only that, but after I got more efficient with the slicing and the swapping, I got a little bit better, a little more controlled with chain piecing even in that format. So you can do it there too if you're good at chain piecing, but I like handling one block at a time just the same. So I'm going to come down here, I'm going to backstitch to lock it in, and then the next block, that was where the sashing goes on this side over here, right? So then I'm going to come around and I'm going to rotate it because I was already sashing between. Now I'm going to bring this square in, and I only need a small little gap, less than 1/4 of an inch, but I've got a 43-inch strip or so, so I can certainly position them all on here. So this one on. Okay, that sashing would have been right here. So now I'm going to grab over on this edge. It's going to drop right in here. And again, about a 1/4 inch distance between. You could put them right next to each other if you're really good with a rotary cutter, but I prefer to have a little bit of grace in there for reasons that are obvious to everybody out there. My caffeine and my crazy behavior, I get a little crooked cutting sometimes. I wonder if they named the expression "that will quilt out" on my behalf. I'm not sure. Okay, sashing is going to go there. Lift that up if you need sometimes. Get a little too far away. Oh my goodness. That was the nitro booster in my machine just kicked in, I guess. And you'll be able to put 4 blocks on every one strip. Lock those down again. just like you see here, like I'm making party flags, right? Nice and fun. And the key is, always we've been holding the batik in the air while we get ready to press, so we're gonna do the exact same thing while we come over to our strips. But what I found was kind of fun, in order to keep the strip from twisting when I had it all across my big long ironing board, is I actually started to pre-flop the batiks over, so that way when I come in here, I can hold them, press, hold it, press, slide this down a little bit, hold and press, always trying to push the white fabric onto the batik. I know I'm being a little sloppy right now, but I'm excited to show you how to cut these up. There you go. And then just bring them right back in line. And I am going to use my ruler. I'm going to keep these as square as possible. So here I'm going to trim. Come down here. And this is what I learned to do. Look, I'm so right-handed, as you saw earlier. I'm going to trim this one first. Okay, then I'm going to spin this one around so I can get a really nice trim on this side too. Just like that. And so now you're going to start to have sashings on all of your squares. Reminder, you only need it on 4 of the squares because there's 5 in a row. Okay, once all of these squares are sashed like this, let's trim the rest of these out real quick. You can then go ahead and start to marry them back together. So you do want to keep them in order while you're working. Right, so this was number 2 in that row. This one here is the number 3 in that row. I shouldn't tell you a story. I shouldn't confess, but I will today. Somehow I noticed I had 2 squares that actually still had 1 piece of fabric that was the same touching. And I already had all my rows built. So I just moved my rows until I was able to get away from it, and it worked. You can't catch it in the quilt. It's awesome. You don't see it. It's not there anymore, but it started to develop. I don't know how I did it. Anyway, so you'll have a no sashing, a block, sashing, and then the next block. So then I would just take these together, and now at this point you really want to take the time to line up your edges because they're all the same length. We're going to go over to the machine. I'll show you this one. Make sure you care for this little seam allowance as it goes through. I'm just making sure these last corners line up beautifully. Just like that. And then again, of course, I would hold my batik in the air as I begin to press, like this. And now my rows are beginning to develop. The row after row after row will develop like that. And then, as you can see, you'll need 5. I just had those 4 together because that was what we had ready. Here's all of the other row built with the sashing in between coming together. In order to finish that off, all you need to do then is take a couple more of your skinny strip. Whoa, that was a tongue tire. Take a few more of your skinny strips, stitch them together like yay, and now those will go all the way through the sashing as you need, just like that, okay? So one more trip back to the quilt here, and you can see there's those small sashings we were building. Here's the long sashings all the way across. I did try to take the time to rotate those seam allowances in the sashing so they're in different spots throughout the quilt so it doesn't look so similar over and over again. And now I want to talk a little bit about how I did the free motion machine quilting. In each square, I simply loaded a variegated blue-purple thread, and I started here in the middle of each square, in the middle of the quilt itself. And then with kind of an echo quilting, or was the distance of my presser foot against the edge of the seam here, I basically stitched a box, tied off, but I did a jump stitch into the next square, around, you see, tied off, jump stitch, around the square, tied off, jump stitch, around the square here, and then I knotted, and then from that point on, I moved into another square that was the next one over, but I still started in the middle and went all around. So the entire quilt is simply straight line quilted about 1/4 of an inch on the interior of all the white sashings. None of the white is quilted as well. And literally, I timed myself. It only took a couple of minutes per block. So believe it or not, this whole quilt only took me a few hours to machine quilt, and it helped me also practice my free motion machine quilting in straight lines, which a lot of you know is something that's a personal goal of mine. Whew. I know that's a lot of information on what I promised you would be a simple quilt, but it's really, really fun and easy to make. I just wanted to make sure you got to see each and every step as I went along the way. I hope you love this project as much as I do. And as a matter of fact, why don't you let me know in the comments below what your first color combinations will be on your slice and swap quilt. We'll catch you next time right here at Man Sewing. Thanks for being a Man Sewing fan. It's great to have you out there encouraging me to create fantastic new content. If you've missed any of the videos, we've got links for you here and here. And while you're checking those out, make sure you're subscribed. We don't want you to miss any of the action.